Section 4 of Essays of Robert Louis Stevenson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Essays of Robert Louis Stevenson. Section 4. Talk and Talkers. Part 1. Sir, we had a good talk. Johnson. As we must account for every idle word, so we must for every idle silence. Franklin. There can be no fairer ambition than to excel in talk, to be affable, gay, ready, clear and welcome, to have a fact, a thought, or an illustration pat to every subject, and not only to cheer the flight of time among our intimates, but bear our part in that great international congress always sitting, where public wrongs are first declared, public errors first corrected, and the course of public opinion shaped day by day a little nearer to the right. No measure comes before Parliament but it has been long ago prepared by the grand jury of the talkers. No book is written that has not been largely composed by their assistance. Literature, in many of its branches, is no other than the shadow of good talk. But the imitation falls far short of the original in life, freedom, and effect. There are always two to a talk, giving and taking, comparing experience and according conclusions. Talk is fluid, tentative, continually in further search and progress, while written words remain fixed, become idols even to the writer, found wooden dogmatisms, and preserve flies of obvious error in the amber of the truth. Last and chief, while literature, gagged with linsey-woolsey, can only deal with a fraction of the life of man, talk goes fancy-free and may call a spade a spade. It cannot, even if it would, become merely aesthetic or merely classical like literature. A jest intervenes, the solemn humbug is dissolved in laughter, and speech runs forth out of the contemporary groove into the open fields of nature, cheery and cheering, like schoolboys out of school. And it is in talk alone that we can learn our period and ourselves. In short, the first duty of a man is to speak. That is his chief business in this world. And talk, which is the harmonious speech of two or more, is by far the most accessible of pleasures. It costs nothing in money. It is all profit. It completes our education, founds and fosters our friendships, and can be enjoyed at any age and in almost any state of health. The spice of life is battle. The friendliest relations are still a kind of contest, and if we would not forego all that is valuable in our lot, we must continually face some other person eye to eye and wrestle a fall, whether in love or enmity. It is still by force of body, or power of character or intellect, that we attain to worthy pleasures. Men and women contend for each other in the lists of love, like rival mesmerists. The active and adroit decide their challenges in the sports of the body. and the sedentary sit down to chess or conversation. All sluggish and pacific pleasures are to the same degree solitary and selfish, and every durable bond between human beings is founded in or heightened by some element of competition. Now, the relation that has the least root in matter is undoubtedly that airy one of friendship, and hence I suppose it is that good talk most commonly arises among friends. Talk is, indeed, both the scene and instrument of friendship. It is in talk alone that the friends can measure strength, and enjoy that amicable counter-assertion of personality, which is the gauge of relations and the sport of life. A good talk is not to be had for the asking. Humours must first be accorded in a kind of overture or prologue. Hour, company, and circumstance be suited, and then, at a fit juncture, the subject, the quarry of two heated minds, spring up like a deer out of the wood. Not that the talker has any of the hunter's pride, though he has all and more than all his ardour. The genuine artist follows the stream of conversation as an angler follows the windings of a brook, not dallying where he fails to kill. He trusts implicitly to hazard, and he is rewarded by continual variety, continual pleasure, and those changing prospects of the truth that are the best of education. There is nothing in a subject so called that we should regard it as an idol, or follow it beyond the promptings of desire. Indeed, there are few subjects, and so far as they are truly talkable, more than the half of them may be reduced to three: that I am I, that you are you, and that there are other people, dimly understood to be not quite the same as either. Wherever talk may range, it still runs half the time on these eternal lines. The theme being set, each plays on himself as on an instrument, asserts and justifies himself, ransacks his brain for instances and opinions, and brings them forth new minted, to his own surprise and the admiration of his adversary. All natural talk is a festival of ostentation, and by the laws of the game each accepts and fans the vanity of the other. It is from that reason that we venture to lay ourselves so open, that we dare to be so warmly eloquent, and that we swell in each other's eyes to such a vast proportion. For talkers, once launched, begin to overflow the limits of their ordinary selves, tower up to the height of their secret pretensions, and give themselves out for the heroes, brave, pious, musical, and wise, that in their most shining moments they aspire to be. So they weave for themselves with words, and for a while inhabit a palace of delights, temple at once and theatre, where they fill the round of the world's dignities, and feast with the gods, exulting in kudos. And when the talk is over, each goes his way, still flushed with vanity and admiration, still trailing clouds of glory. Each declines from the height of his ideal orgie, not in a moment, but by slow declension. I remember, in the entr'acte of an afternoon performance, coming forth into the sunshine in a beautiful green gardened corner of a romantic city, and as I sat and smoked, the music moving in my blood, I seemed to sit there and evaporate the Flying Dutchman, for it was that I had been hearing, with a wonderful sense of life, warmth, well-being and pride, and the noises of the city, voices, bells, and marching feet, fell together in my ears like a symphonious orchestra. In the same way, the excitement of a good talk lives for a long while after in the blood, the heart still hot within you, the brain still simmering, and the physical earth swimming around you with the colours of the sunset. Natural talk, like ploughing, should turn up a large surface of life, rather than dig mines into geological strata. Masses of experience, anecdote, incident, cross-lights, quotation, historical instances, the whole flotsam and jetsam of two minds forced in and in upon the matter in hand from every point of the compass, and from every degree of mental elevation and abasement, these are the material with which talk is fortified, the food on which the talkers thrive. Such argument as is proper to the exercise should still be brief and seizing. Talk should proceed by instances, by the apposite, not the expository. It should keep close along the lines of humanity, near the bosoms and businesses of men, at the level where history, fiction, and experience intersect and illuminate each other. I am I, and you are you, with all my heart, but conceive how these lean propositions change and brighten when, instead of words, the actual you and I sit cheek by jowl, the spirit housed in the live body, and the very clothes uttering voices to corroborate the story in the face. Not less surprising is the change when we leave off to speak of generalities, the bad, the good, the miser, and all the characters of Theophrastus, and call up other men by anecdote or instance in their very trick and feature, or trading on a common knowledge, toss each other famous names still glowing with the hues of life. Communication is no longer by words, but by the instancing of whole biographies, epics, systems of philosophy, and epochs of history in bulk. That which is understood excels that which is spoken in quantity and quality alike. Ideas thus figured and personified change hands, as we may say, like coin, and the speakers imply without effort the most obscure and intricate thoughts. Strangers who have a large common ground of reading will, for this reason, come the sooner to the grapple of genuine converse. If they know Othello and Napoleon, Consuelo and Clarissa Harlowe, Vautrin, Steenie Steenson, they can leave generalities and begin at once to speak by figures. Conduct and art are the two subjects that arise most frequently and that embrace the widest range of facts. A few pleasures bear discussion for their own sake, but only those which are most social or most radically human, and even these can only be discussed among their devotees. A technicality is always welcome to the expert, whether in athletics, art, or law. I have heard the best kind of talk on technicalities from such rare and happy persons as both know and love their business. No human being ever spoke of scenery for above 2 minutes at a time, which makes me suspect we hear too much of it in literature. The weather is regarded as the very nadir and scoff of conversational topics. And yet the weather, the dramatic element in scenery, is far more tractable in language, and far more human both in import and suggestion than the stable features of the landscape. Sailors and shepherds, and the people generally of coast and mountain, talk well of it, and it is often excitingly presented in literature. But the tendency of all living talk draws it back and back into the common focus of humanity. Talk is a creature of the street and market-place, feeding on gossip, and its last resort is still in a discussion on morals. That is the heroic form of gossip, heroic in virtue of its high pretensions, but still gossip because it turns on personalities. You can keep no men long, nor Scotchmen at all, off moral or theological discussion. These are to all the world what law is to lawyers. They are everybody's technicalities, the medium through which all consider life, and the dialect in which they express their judgments. I knew 3 young men who walked together daily for some 2 months in a solemn and beautiful forest, and in cloudless summer weather. Daily they talked with unabated zest, and yet scarce wandered that whole time beyond 2 subjects, theology and love. And perhaps neither a court of love nor an assembly of divines would have granted their premises or welcomed their conclusions. Conclusions, indeed, are not often reached by talk, any more than by private thinking. That is not the profit. The profit is in the exercise, and above all in the experience. For when we reason at large on any subject, we review our state and history in life. From time to time, however, and specially I think in talking art, talk becomes effective, conquering like war, widening the boundaries of knowledge like an exploration. A point arises. The question takes a problematical, a baffling, yet a likely air. The talkers begin to feel lively presentiments of some conclusion near at hand. Towards this they strive with emulous ardour, each by his own path, and struggling for first utterance, and then one leaps upon the summit of that matter with a shout, and almost at the same moment the other is beside him, and behold, they are agreed. Like enough, the progress is illusory, a mere cat's cradle having been wound and unwound out of words, but the sense of joint discovery is none the less giddy and inspiring. And in the life of the talker, such triumphs, though imaginary, are neither few nor far apart. They are attained with speed and pleasure in the hour of mirth, and by the nature of the process they are always worthily shared. There is a certain attitude, combative at once and deferential, eager to fight, yet most averse to quarrel, which marks out at once the talkable man. It is not eloquence, not fairness, not obstinacy, but a certain proportion of all of these that I love to encounter in my amicable adversaries. They must not be pontiffs holding doctrine, but huntsmen questing after elements of truth. Neither must they be boys to be instructed, but fellow teachers with whom I may wrangle and agree on equal terms. We must reach some solution, some shadow of consent, for without that eager talk becomes a torture. But we do not wish to reach it cheaply or quickly, or without the tussle and effort wherein pleasure lies. The very best talker with me is one whom I shall call Spring-heeled Jack. I say so because I never knew anyone who mingled so largely the possible ingredients of converse. In the Spanish proverb, the fourth man necessary to compound a salad is a madman to mix it. Jack is that madman. I know not what is more remarkable, the insane lucidity of his conclusions, the humorous eloquence of his language, or his power of method, bringing the whole of life into the focus of the subject treated, mixing the conversational salad like a drunken god. He doubles like the serpent, changes and flashes like the shaken kaleidoscope, transmigrates bodily into the views of others, and so, in the twinkling of an eye and with a heady rapture, turns questions inside out, and flings them empty before you on the ground, like a triumphant conjurer. It is my common practice, when a piece of conduct puzzles me, to attack it in the presence of Jack with such grossness, such partiality, and such wearing iteration, as at length shall spur him up in its defence. In a moment he transmigrates, dons the required character, and with moonstruck philosophy justifies the act in question. I can fancy nothing to compare with the vim of these impersonations, the strange scale of language, flying from Shakespeare to Kant, and from Kant to Major Dingwell, as fast as a musician scatters sounds out of an instrument. The sudden sweeping generalizations, the absurd irrelevant particularities, the wit, wisdom, folly, humour, eloquence, and bathos, each startling in its kind, and yet all luminous in the admired disorder of their combination. A talker of a different calibre, though belonging to the same school, is Burly. Burly is a man of great presence. He commands a larger atmosphere, gives the impression of a grosser mass of character than most men. It has been said of him that his presence could be felt in a room you entered blindfold, and the same, I think, has been said of other powerful constitutions condemned to much physical inaction. There is something boisterous and pyratic in Burly's manner of talk, which suits well enough with this impression. He will roar you down, he will bury his face in his hands, he will undergo passions of revolt and agony, and meanwhile his attitude of mind is really both conciliatory and receptive, and after pistol has been out-pistoled, and the welkin rung for hours, you begin to perceive a certain subsidence in these spring torrents, points of agreement issue, and you end arm in arm, and in a glow of mutual admiration. The outcry only serves to make your final union the more unexpected and precious. Throughout there has been perfect sincerity, perfect intelligence, a desire to hear, although not always to listen, and an unaffected eagerness to meet concessions. You have, with Burly, none of the dangers that attend debate with spring-heeled Jack, who may at any moment turn his powers of transmigration on yourself, create for you a view you never held, and then furiously fall on you for holding it. These at least are my two favourites, and both are loud, copious, intolerant talkers. This argues that I myself am in the same category, for if we love talking at all, we love a bright, fierce adversary who will hold his ground, foot by foot, in much our own manner, sell his attention dearly, and give us our full measure of the dust and exertion of battle. Both these men can be beat from a position, but it takes 6 hours to do it. A high and hard adventure worth attempting. With both you can pass days in an enchanted country of the mind, with people, scenery, and manners of its own, live a life apart, more arduous, active, and glowing than any real existence, and come forth again, when the talk is over, as out of a theatre or a dream, to find the east wind still blowing, and the chimney-pots of the old battered city still around you. Jack has the far finer mind, Burly the far more honest. Jack gives us the animated poetry, Burly the romantic prose of similar themes. The one glances high like a meteor and makes a light in darkness. The other, with many changing hues of fire, burns at the sea level like a conflagration. But both have the same humour and artistic interests, the same unquenched ardour in pursuit, the same gusts of talk and thunderclaps of contradiction. Cockshot is a different article, but vastly entertaining, and has been meat and drink to me for many a long evening. His manner is dry, brisk, and pertinacious, and the choice of words not much. The point about him is his extraordinary readiness and spirit. You can propound nothing but he has either a theory about it ready-made, or will have one instantly on the stocks, and proceed to lay its timbers and launch it in your presence. "Let me see," he will say, "give me a moment. I should have some theory for that." A blither spectacle than the vigour with which he sets about the task it were hard to fancy. He is possessed by a demoniac energy, welding the elements for his life, and bending ideas, as an athlete bends a horseshoe, with a visible and lively effort. He has, in theorising, a compass, an art, what I would call the synthetic gusto, something of a Herbert Spencer, who should see the fun of the thing. You are not bound, and no more is he, to place your faith in these brand new opinions. But some of them are right enough, durable even for life, and the poorest serve for a cock-shy, as when idle people, after picnics, float a bottle on a pond, and have an hour's diversion ere it sinks. Whichever they are, serious opinions or humours of the moment, he still defends his ventures with indefatigable wit and spirit, hitting savagely himself, but taking punishment like a man. He knows and never forgets that people talk, first of all, for the sake of talking, conducts himself in the ring, to use the old slang, like a thorough glutton, and honestly enjoys a telling facer from his adversary. Cockshot is bottled effervescency, the sworn foe of sleep. 3 in the morning, Cockshot, says a victim. His talk is like the driest of all imaginable dry champagnes. Sleight of hand and inimitable quickness are the qualities by which he lives. Athelred, on the other hand, presents you with the spectacle of a sincere and somewhat slow nature thinking aloud. He is the most unready man I ever knew to shine in conversation. You may see him sometimes wrestle with a refractory jest for a minute or two together, and perhaps fail to throw it in the end. And there is something singularly engaging, often instructive, in the simplicity with which he thus exposes the process as well as the result, the works as well as the dial of the clock. Withal, he has his hours of inspiration. Apt words come to him as if by accident, and coming from deeper down, they smack the more personally. They have the more of fine old crusted humanity, rich in sediment and humour. There are sayings of his in which he has stamped himself into the very grain of the language. You would think he must have worn the words next his skin and slept with them. Yet it is not as a sayer of particular good things that Athelred is most to be regarded, rather as the stalwart woodman of thought. I have pulled on a light cord often enough, while he has been wielding the broad axe, and between us, on this unequal division, many a specious fallacy has fallen. I have known him to battle the same question night after night for years, keeping it in the rein of talk, constantly applying it and reapplying it to life with humorous or grave intention, and all the while never hurrying, nor flagging, nor taking an unfair advantage of the facts. Jack, at a given moment, when arising, as it were, from the tripod, can be more radiantly just to those from whom he differs, but then the tenor of his thoughts is even calumnious, while Athelred, slower to forge excuses, is yet slower to condemn, and sits over the welter of the world, vacillating but still judicial, and still faithfully contending with his doubts. Both the last talkers deal much in points of conduct and religion, studied in the dry light of prose. Indirectly, and as if against his will, the same elements from time to time appear in the troubled and poetic talk of Opalstein. His varied and exotic knowledge, complete, although unready sympathies, and fine, full, discriminative flow of language, fit him out to be the best of talkers. So perhaps he is with some, not quite with me. Proxime accessit, comes close, I should say. He sings the praises of the earth and the arts, flowers and jewels, wine and music, in a moonlight serenading manner, as to the light guitar. Even wisdom comes from his tongue like singing. No one is indeed more tuneful in the upper notes, but even while he sings the song of the sirens, he still hearkens to the barking of the Sphinx. Jarring Byronic notes interrupt the flow of his Horatian humours. His mirth has something of the tragedy of the world for its perpetual background, and he feasts like Don Giovanni to a double orchestra, one lightly sounding for the dance, one pealing Beethoven in the distance. He is not truly reconciled either with life or with himself, and this instant war in his members sometimes divides the man's attention. He does not always, perhaps not often, frankly surrender himself in conversation. He brings into the talk other thoughts than those which he expresses. You are conscious that he keeps an eye on something else, that he does not shake off the world, nor quite forget himself. Hence arise occasional disappointments, even an occasional unfairness for his companions, who find themselves one day giving too much, and the next, when they are weary out of season, giving perhaps too little. Purcell is in another class from any I have mentioned. He is no debater, but appears in conversation, as occasion arises, in two distinct characters, one of which I admire and fear, and the other love. In the first he is radiantly civil and rather silent, sits on a high, courtly hilltop, and from that vantage ground drops you his remarks like favours. He seems not to share in our sublunary contentions. He wears no sign of interest, when on a sudden there falls in a crystal of wit, so polished that the dull do not perceive it, but so right that the sensitive are silenced. True talk should have more body and blood, should be louder, vainer, and more declaratory of the man. The true talker should not hold so steady an advantage over whom he speaks with. And that is one reason out of a score why I prefer my Purcell in his second character, when he unbends into a strain of graceful gossip, singing like the fireside kettle. In these moods he has an elegant homeliness that rings of the true Queen Anne. I know another person who attains in his moments to the insolence of a Restoration comedy, speaking, I declare, as Congreve wrote, but that is a sport of nature, and scarce falls under the rubric, for there is none, alas, to give him answer. One last remark occurs. It is the mark of genuine conversation that the sayings can scarce be quoted with their full effect beyond the circle of common friends. To have their proper weight, they should appear in a biography, and with the portrait of the speaker. Good talk is dramatic, It is like an impromptu piece of acting where each should represent himself to the greatest advantage. And that is the best kind of talk, where each speaker is most fully and candidly himself, and where, if you were to shift the speeches round from one to another, there would be the greatest loss in significance and perspicuity. It is for this reason that talk depends so wholly on our company. We should like to introduce Falstaff and Mercutio, or Falstaff and Sir Toby. But Falstaff in talk with Cordelia seems even painful. Most of us, by the protean quality of man, can talk to some degree with all, but the true talk, that strikes out all the slumbering best of us, comes only with the peculiar brethren of our spirits, is founded as deep as love in the constitution of our being, and is a thing to relish with all our energy while yet we have it, and to be grateful for forever. End of section 4. Recording by Martin Geeson in Hazelmere, Surrey.